Hello everybody and welcome to the latest in my SymProjects update, which is the air pressure gauge. Yes, for some of you long-term subscribers, you already know where I'm going with this, but for some of you guys that are literally just popping in for the very first time to watch this and wondering what's going on. Right, since version 17 of SymProjects software, they mentioned that they brought in air pressure to the telemetry, so it can now read air pressure, but yet it was experimental, so you couldn't integrate it you couldn't put it as a readable gauge onto SymProjects, so you couldn't actually put a live working gauge onto SymProjects. So at that time I then decided to buy what was a cheap, what I think and I now actually believe for certain it is a replica Evo or Dragon gauge, because I'll go into later why I think it's a replica one. But I bought it for about 35 quid, roughly 25 to 35 quid. I can't remember what the full price was. And at the same time, I bought a Arduino board to try and set it up. So I had two options if I wanted to. Initially, I tried to get the Arduino board set up, but because I'm not so good at that sort of side of stuff, with software side and everything else, I just couldn't figure out how to get the thing to work. So I kind of put it on a shelf and forgot about it. And I've been watching the updates from SymProjects for the last however many months. For you long-term subscribers, you've been like listening to me sort of every now and again saying, "Oh, the latest update's got this in it. The latest update's got that in it." So version 18 had updates, patch fixes, etc., etc., mainly to racing simulators and stuff like that. And then there was another mini update which had sort of like race room updates in it and more configurable settings. And then when version 19 came about, and it just said, "Oh, it's done more settings, it's refined more settings." And then there was another small update recently, sort of mid-February kind of time, which I hadn't noticed gone by. I saw it and I was like, well, again, it's probably just patch fixes. I thought, rather than just ignore it, I thought I'd download it and update my Simdash anyway, just in case if I left it for too long, I didn't want it to sort of start forgetting settings if there's a major update, etc., etc., etc. I remember having that one problem once I did one major update, etc., and I lost all my settings and everything. So I thought I'd keep it relatively up to date. Just for fun, I went in to configure the settings, just to make sure my settings are all okay. And I selected this selector, and I thought, well, if they've added it in without mentioning it, it's going to be in here. So I selected the gauges, rolled down to see if it was air pressure was included, and there it was, sitting at the bottom of the selection, air pressure gauges or air pressure. So I was just like, right, brilliant, okay, I better set this all up. So now you know what's going on. So I'm going to sort of fulfill you in top right hand corner there. That's SymProjects. That's real-time live telemetry running to through SymProjects, and it's reading it real time, and that's what you get for the data view. Bottom right hand corner there obviously is my cheap knockoff Evo Dragon gauge, and please, like for you long-term subscribers, you know exactly what I'm going to say next, but for you guys that are watching this for the very first time, you can see it says oil pressure, and you're going to sit there going, well, yeah, it's oil pressure, idiot. It's meant to be air pressure. Yeah, I know that. But a proper air pressure gauge costs around about electronically driven air pressure gauge. That is not a pneumatically driven air pressure gauge, an electrically driven air pressure gauge from eBay is roughly £90 before shipping. That's before shipping. So you're going to put another, what, £5-10 on that? I wasn't willing to pay £102 for a air pressure gauge. Sorry peeps, as much as I'd like to keep it as realistic as possible, I'm not shelling out that sort of money for just a one gauge. Sorry. I will keep an eye out for an air pressure gauge. If I see one pop up that's electrically driven, going for reasonably cheap, it needs to be within pressure margins, sort of like anything between for bar pressure between 0 and I'm going to say 15 bar, just to be on the safe side, and for PSI anything between 0 and 200 PSI, anything around that grouping, and you know, as long as it's fairly accurate and can keep up with the changes, I'm great, I'll be happy. But for now I'm just going to use this oil pressure gauge. Right, that's out of the way. Right, so as you can see in the bottom right hand corner there, again, this is as accurate as I could get it to work with the SymProjects software. And again, as I will say, I believe it's a bit of a not legit gauge because it's a bit hit and miss, and the fact that you're trying to wire it into a computer, a main little board, which may not be its right intended use. Right, and we're in a Kenny 521 here. As you guys can see, it's got its new colour scheme. I'm not going to show you what it looks like on the outside because that'd be a bit of a spoiler, but you guys are going to probably see it in the next Let's Play. Some of you Facebook peeps are already were a part of my Facebook group. We're already aware of what it looks like. So there's a big spoiler alert, but hey ho. As you can see, the gauge. Looking at the gauge in the truck, if I make sure, turn it on and turn it back off again. Actually, there we go. Turn the ignition on because right. That's the only way we can get the gauges to align properly. So looking at the Kenworth gauge, you're looking at, it's just, again, I don't know if Eagle set that to bar or PSI, but looking at that, it's roughly just over 100 PSI or 100 bar. Looking at my gauge, it's saying 116, which is looking roughly right, because looking at it, it's 120. It's not going to be spot on, but then if I look at the real-time data, sorry, I was just looking, it's 113 PSI, roughly. And right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pump the brakes down and drain it right out. So first press of the pedal, it's now just over 105. Yeah, 105 PSI. Looking at the gauge, it's saying 105 PSI. Looking at the gauge in the truck, it's just saying over 90. I don't know if that's a PSI or if that's bar. I don't know. As I say, this may again not be 100% accurate. So press again, and I'll keep just bleeding it down. It might start buzzing at us. It's doing 30 PSI on the gauge, and it's just saying 30 PSI on the real-time telemetry. On the gauge on here, it's saying empty. Well, it's just off empty. Again, I'm not going to crucify eager for that, because again, it's just as long as the gauge is working, and it's actually working, I don't mind. But anyway, let's drain it down to nothing. Right, there's no air. Well, there's no air in the brake system at all now. So I haven't got track IR because I wanted to keep the image steady as best as I could without looking at it. So let's fire it up. It's gonna buzz like nobody's business. I'm sorry, Pete. So I apologise in advance. Try and build it up as quick as I can. And it's up to 30% or 33 psi on the gauge on the real-time telemetry. On the gauge it's 37. It's keeping up roughly to what the real-time telemetry is saying. The gauge in truck, it's just over what, it's like 20. Right, so yeah, it's about 64 real time, 60. Well, again, it's fluctuating around the 60 mark on the gauge in the bottom right on the gauge. There's actual gauge on the gauge, well, the real gauge. And looking at the gauge in game, it's just under 60 actually. So it's not far out either way. 77 psi on the gauge on the bottom right, 80 roughly. Again, it's not far out because it's climbing while I'm looking as well, which doesn't help. As you can see, it sort of like fluctuates, it jumps in segments. See how it jumped up from 80 odd to 95 there? And it jumped up again there. It should cut off around about the 120 mark. Okay, so 126 on the gauge. On the real-time data, it's 123. Okay, so about three out roughly. And on the in-game gauge, it's actually under that. It's just, I don't know. Again, it's not that's PSI. I assume it is. It's roughly about 90. Between, it was 120, 110, I should say. Don't know what happened there, why it cut out, but it just did. Right, okay, so I'm gonna now press on the brakes and see what happens. So that goes down pretty quick. Doesn't go straight up though. Looking at the real-time data, it's holding roughly just over 100 psi, which I've noticed that it won't kick in until you get it just under 90, and then it kicks back in again. But I'll leave it at that, peeps. Let's switch it back off anyway. But I hope you guys enjoyed this little update, and if you did, please feel free to like, and if you didn't enjoy this little update, then please feel free to dislike. But please let me know why in the comments down below, so then I can improve in the future. And if you know anyone else that may also enjoy watching this, again, guys and girls, please feel free to share. It helps me out. I don't mind you sharing. And if you're new to my channel and want to see future updates of the Simdash or anything else that I'm working on, please don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. TTFN.